The reason why I never got caught for anything that I did is because I didn't have a digital trace. I'm on my way out. I'm a couple of months away from being completely clean. I'm not doing identity theft anymore. I'm not doing any collections. I have a little bit more money coming in from the embezzlement. I didn't make too many big mistakes, right? This is the time I did. And you know, when you're desperate, that's when you make the most foolish decisions. So, my name is Germano Tomassetti. I was born in Winnipeg, Canada. My childhood was relatively normal. I grew up in a household up until I was about 10 years old. I grew up with two sisters, my mom and my dad, and it was relatively normal. I dealt with a lot of bullying when I was in elementary school, partially because of me just being a little bit different, being one of the ADD kids, and then also because my sister was kind of popular in junior high, and the younger siblings of the people that didn't like her would pick on me and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't have a great time in school. I couldn't concentrate. I wasn't interested. I excelled in certain areas like math I was really good at, which would, come in handy later on. And I was also good with English, language arts, that kind of stuff. But if you put like science in front of me or physics or anything like that, like I would just be, turn into the class clown and just ignore work. Um because of the bullying, eventually I started, fighting back quite literally. I got into a lot of fights when I was in elementary school, junior high, even going into high school. But the big change for me is when I got into junior high, I started hanging around with, you could say, the bad kids. At that time, the bad kids weren't that bad, but they're smoking weed, they're skipping school, they're getting in trouble in class all the time. I started hanging out with these guys because I had spent so much time on my own. I had friends, but I was bullied a lot, like I said, and now I'm hanging out with guys that don't get bullied. If anything, some of them do the bullying. I didn't partake in that, but I was friends with these guys because they accepted me. They didn't care that other people didn't like me, and they basically took me under their wing. And through that, I start to get introduced to crime. And obviously, at that age, it's nothing really serious. We're stealing janitors' keys and breaking into schools at night. I think the biggest thing that we did when I was in my teenage years was probably, and I'm talking 13, 14 years old, we broke into a school one night and they were doing fundraising for, I don't know, it was like Girl Scouts or whatever it was, and we stole an envelope and it had a lot of money in it. I can't remember exactly, but thousands of dollars. And at that time, to be that age and to see that kind of money, it was a big deal for us. So, other than that, nothing was really going on. Once I get into high school, I'm dealing with the same thing. Now it's on a larger scale. Now I'm getting in a fight every 2 weeks, and I'm getting expelled constantly. And I was just a problem at the end of the day. I had a lot of anger built up because, as I told you, I grew up in the household that I did. But around 10 years old, my dad left. He was in and out of jail constantly, and my mother just, I guess, she had enough, and they got divorced. And I didn't really see him much after that.
In jail? What I mean, fights or drinking or
No,
real
so
real
his thing was armed robbery. So from about yeah, it was serious stuff. So when
Yeah.
he was 17 years old, he robbed a chain out here called Safeway with a couple of his friends. They got away with like $60,000, which is a lot of money back then. We're talking about 45, 50 years ago. And he was so successful at it that he started doing it consistently. So I'm told between 17 and 19 years old, he did about 5 or 6 really big armed robberies, including like a McDonald's for like 8 grand or 10 grand or whatever, and a couple of other places. But he took off to Montreal for whatever reason. I don't know if he was feeling the heat or whatever it was, but the police or the RCMP ended up catching up with him in Montreal when he was 19 years old or 20 years old, and they arrested him, and he ended up doing 6 years his first stint. So, like I said, from a young age, he was into that. It's unfortunate too because he was a very hard worker within the construction world. He was a great singer. I was told when he was like 16 years old that he was offered $1 million contract in Nashville to sing because he could sing like Elvis Presley. So he had a bunch of things going for him, and apparently he always blamed, this is what I'm told, he blamed his mom for not giving him the opportunity because she was the one at the end of the day that said, "No, you're not going." She didn't want her son to go to the US and get into trouble and whatever else, right? So, but yeah, he basically moved on from armed robberies in his, later teens and early 20s to doing that time in jail. He gets out, and as far as I know, up until he was about 30, he was always against drugs. So he didn't even smoke weed or anything like that. He was very anti-drugs. And then at one point, I guess, his cousin introduces him into cocaine. He starts partying and stuff like that. And somehow, I don't know how it connects here, but he gets into heroin eventually. And once he got into heroin, that was it. That was like, it was no longer about money. Like when it comes down to the robberies or whatever, it was not. Maybe he liked it for the thrill of it before, but now he's an addict. So now he's doing crazy stuff. We have in, I don't know about your city, but here in our taxis, we have like this like plastic shield that goes around the driver so you can't stab him. And people told me that in my city, my dad, along with his crew, were part of the reason why they put that in there because he was doing so many taxi robberies at that point. And it sucks because, like I said, he was a very talented guy, very hardworking, anti drugs for a lot of time. Then his cousin gets him into some stuff, and the rest is history. He ends up, I'll jump ahead here just about him, and then we'll go back into the other dynamics. But he ended up passing away a couple of years ago during COVID, and as far as I know, it was an overdose. So he had been doing heroin probably from his 30s up until almost 60 years old, which you can imagine takes a toll on the body, right? Because
Yeah.
any of those guys that get set heavy into it, their body just gets completely depleted. He used to be like he's like me, he's about 5'7", 5'8", but he was always a jacked guy. He always, he had that jailhouse build, right? All upper body, nothing nothing below. And but then, with the heroin, he just looked like a twig. I saw him once in those like 16 or 17 years, sorry, twice. One was at my mother's funeral, and then another time was right before I got into all the crime that I was doing. We tried to reconnect and he was just gone. Like having a conversation with him, it was sad because I could tell that it was almost like he had an intellectual disability. His brain was so fried from the drugs and his body looked so weak. He's probably 50 or 50 something at the time, but he looked like he was 80. You know what I
Mm.
mean? So that's the history with him.
Your mom, so you were if we go back to the where we were to begin with, your mom had basically said, "Yeah, well, I'm done with them,"
Yep.
and and you two moved out, or she throw him out? Like,
Well, no, I think he went to jail, and then, like, during that time in jail, she probably divorced him or whatever it was. Like, he was
okay,
constantly in and out for shorter terms later on, like a year or 2 or whatever, for little robberies and probably, going against his probation or whatever it was, right? And then the only reason why I brought that up is because as I was getting to the teenage years into the younger adult years, I was very angry. So, a part of it was because my dad had left, and then at one point, I always had authority issues. I couldn't listen to anybody. Anybody that was trying to tell me anything, I didn't want to listen to them, including my mom. So eventually she got fed up with me a little bit, and I ended up spending about a year doing like group homes. I was in like housing and stuff like that with other teens, and that was a terrible experience in itself because I come from a place called Transcona in Winnipeg, and it's kind of like small town mentality. There's not a lot of foreigners. It's like white picket fence, that kind of stuff. It's not rich by any means, but it's kind of closed off from the rest of the city, and it's a city by itself. So when I go into these group homes, all of a sudden I'm going to the North End or Elmwood, and these are the places that are a little bit harder, right? More poverty stricken and full of gangs and drug dealing and stuff like that. So I mean, in a way, it did good things for me because it toughened me up, but it didn't do anything good other than that, and it made me more upset with my mom because 'cause I'm like, "You left me in this shithole to fend for myself, and now I'm fighting these kids that are, like, hardened." You know what I mean? 'Cause
right,
get getting in a fight at school with, like, just the kid that gets in a fight once a year is nothing, but the kid that fights, like, every day in his hood, like, that guy's gonna be tough, you know what I mean? So, yeah, I was not happy with it, and, when I did go back home and going into those early teenage years, I was just more upset with her, and I just wouldn't listen to anything. By probably grade 10, halfway in, I dropped out because I was getting expelled all the time, and a lot of the fights that I was getting into at that point were for other people. I always stuck up for other people, you know what I mean? And when I was in high school, I was the guy that was friends with everybody. So I'd be friends with jocks, I'd be friends with metalheads, I'd be friends with nerds, like anime geeks, all kinds of stuff. So some of these guys were regularly picked on by the cool kids or whatever, and I'd end up fighting for them. So I got tired of being blamed all the time and the teachers looking at me like I was the problem. In a way, I was sometimes in the classroom not concentrating and stuff, but when it came to those fights, like I wasn't looking for them. I just felt like it was my responsibility to stick up for, weaker people. So I drop out around that time, and then I basically spend a year or so working just at, regular jobs. I think I probably worked at McDonald's and, whatever crap jobs you work when you're 16 years old.
Right.
And then I eventually get into there was an underage party. It was called Feel the Heat in Winnipeg. It was a really popular thing. So like 3,000, 4,000 kids would show up once a month for these underage parties. Obviously no alcohol or anything like that, but that is where I got introduced to the street life. So keep in mind, I'm coming from Transcona, white picket fence, whatever else. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's fights and stuff, but it's not a dangerous place. So now I'm starting to go downtown and I'm going to these parties and I'm being friends with people that are friends with other people and, etc. And I get introduced to this kid that's basically locally famous for rapping. He was actually really good. If he stuck to it, he would have been successful. He would have made money. He would have been a star. I think so. But he was too involved in the street stuff. So at this time, I'm like 17 years old, 18 years old, and he's probably a year or two younger than me. But he was deep into the game. Like he was selling probably, I don't know, over the weekend he'd sell like 4 ounces. You know what I mean? Like of because that's what it started with, and then eventually, just because it was more money and it was more prevalent in the streets, but keep in mind, this is like a 16, 17-year-old kid making thousands or tens of thousands of dollars while trying to maintain this kind of this rap career as well. And he was the one. I always credit him for showing me the street life, everything from drugs to guns to, we'd go to house parties and we'd have a problem with people because of him all the time. So here's the thing. A lot of the gangs didn't like him because he had a big mouth and he was very popular with women. So he's a mulatto guy who was good looking and he was young and he was stealing everybody's girlfriends, including some gangsters. So we had a crew ourselves, but we always got into it with these much bigger groups and gangs because of him. You know what I mean? It was just like we were so loyal to him and he was such a just I don't know, just a character that he just constantly had problems. So anyways, he shows me a little bit about this world, and eventually, after a couple of years of hanging out, I kinda get tired of it. I dabbled in drug dealing when I was younger at around that age. Wasn't good at it, first of all. Second of all, didn't like it. I was too empathetic. I remember that one story that sticks with me in particular is he asked me to come with him to collect an amount from someone that owed like 4K or 5K or whatever. This was in one of the hoods. And we go to collect off this guy, and he's got no money, and, he's got nothing really that he can give up because he's already done this. He's already gone to the pawn shop and sold everything that he has. So if he didn't come up with something, something bad was gonna happen to him. I don't think we would've killed him, but he was gonna get a beating. So he ends up handing over this piece of paper, and it's basically like the slip to his daughter's car. So his daughter had just turned 16 years old and he bought her like a used car or whatever for her birthday and he was about to give it to her the following week and he basically like wrote over the car right then and there just to take care of his debt. And for me, like I said, growing up empathetic and poor, mind you, because my mom raised us after my dad being in jail all the time, was very empathetic to people going through that situation, especially with drugs. So that day in particular, I said, I'm never doing this again. Like, I don't like the way it makes me feel. You guys do your thing. I'll still hang out with you, be friends and stuff, but I'm not hanging out. I'm not doing the late hours. I'm not working a phone. I'm not doing any of that stuff anymore because I'm just too emotional for it. So a couple of years go by, we're hanging out, and then we don't. I just kind of get tired of all of it. I get tired of going out to the events. I get tired of being around the hood, the paranoia, the beef with gangs, all the shit that comes with the street life.
If you sleep hot at night, you know how disruptive that can be. Whether you're having trouble falling asleep, you're waking up sweating in the middle of the night, or all of the above, that's where Ghost Bed can help. As the makers of the coolest beds in the world, Ghost Bed is your go-to for cooling mattresses, cooling pillows, and cooling bedding. From their signature Ghost Ice fabric to patented technology that adjusts to your body's temperature, every Ghost Bed mattress is designed with cooling in mind. So whether you want a plusher mattress that cushions your shoulders and hips, or a firm option with exceptional support, your Ghost Bed will keep you cool and comfortable all night long. When you purchase a Ghost Bed mattress, your comfort is guaranteed. You can try out your mattress for 101 nights, risk-free, to make sure it's the right fit for you. Plus, they offer free shipping, and most items are shipped within 24 hours. If you're not sure which Ghost Bed is right for you, check out their mattress quiz. You'll answer a few questions and get a personalized recommendation. Even better, our listeners can get 50% off site-wide for a limited time. Just visit ghostbed.com/Cox and use the code COX at checkout. Again, that's ghostbed.com/Cox with the code COX at the checkout to save a whopping 50% off site-wide.
And I just want to make it really clear. I've said this in other podcasts as well. Like, I was not a thug when I was a kid. I did a little bit of this. I admit that, I was selling drugs a little bit and stuff, but I was not a gangster or a gang member or anything like that. I hung around with a lot of them, but I wasn't like one of those guys. So, and that's not to say like that I'm not guilty. It's just to let people know I'm not trying to, I don't want you to perceive me as that because I'm not that.
Yeah, you're not
So,
trying to pretend to be a thug.
no, I'm not, and, like, sometimes I might look like it 'cause I got hand tattoos and all this other stuff, but, like, if you hear the way I talk, you understand how I carried myself throughout most of my life. Um, so, yeah, eventually I leave that social circle, and then I become friends with another drug dealer. And he's a white boy, he grew up in a nice area, and he was the other type of drug dealer. So, there's the type that are in the streets that are on the hula gang thing, that's what we call it. And then there's the guys that are the businessmen and the ones that are quiet and dress nicely and don't hang out at clubs and just keep to their business. So I met this guy around, let's say, 20 years old. He ended up living like a block or two away from me. And in the middle of us was this place called the Circle. And that's where Osborne meets with River. And they call it the Circle because that's the spot. That's where everybody kind of hangs out. That's where you go to get drugs. That's where the homeless would hang out, the skaters, everything. So he used to sell at the Circle, and I live 2 blocks away downriver, and he lives 2 blocks away on Osborne. So we just naturally, clicked up and became friends, and I saw the other side of drug dealing, right? I saw that quiet side. He lives in a penthouse 2 blocks away. He's very quiet. He doesn't have any beef with anybody, and I was like, that was the only time I thought about getting into it because he's doing well for himself too. He's probably doing around that time, probably like 10K a month, and he's living well. And he's also 2 years younger than me. He's like 18 years old, and he's living like this. I'm like, damn, man, I'm making like maybe $1,500 a month from my full time job right now, and I've seen you make 10 grand like it's nothing. You know what I mean? And the addicts were different too. That's important to quickly talk about, right? So when you got in the hood, and then you got like rich white folks with buying money, you're dealing with a different clientele. That headache is not as intense. And with your phone can be running at 3 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, 3 p.m., whatever. And it was more of like a nighttime thing. People do it at the clubs, whatever. So I hang out with him, and this brings me into the next stage of my life. So I'm hanging out with him. One night we're out there late. We're at the Circle late. We're there till like it's probably 1 o'clock in the morning. And this homeless traveler chick that we had befriended, and she was just a cool little punk from somewhere in the States. She comes around and she says, "Hey, what are you guys doing? Do you want to come to a party?" And we're looking at the time, we're like, it's 1 o'clock. All the clubs close in Winnipeg at 2 o'clock. So we're like, where are you going at 1 o'clock? There's no point. She's like, no, no, no. We're gonna go to this place called AM After Hours. And I was like, what the hell is that? And they're like, I guess he knew about it too. And he's like, oh, it's like a rave kind of. It's every weekend, Friday, Saturday, midnight till 6 a.m. or later.
What
And I
what
was
year
like,
was this? What year is
this
this?
okay, so I want to say this is probably timeline wise, maybe 2009,
Okay.
2010. Yeah. Um, so yeah, they tell me about this party. He convinces me to go. I go and I show up to this warehouse looking place and looks sketchy as hell. And everybody's there. There's goths there, there's gangsters, there's preppies, there's everybody's there. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy. Like, how are these guys all together? Because my last memory of seeing all these people together was high school and they all hated each other and there was fights all the time. And then I go into this, the rave scene and it's like everyone's on equal ground. Like nobody's like, you know what I mean? Like they're hanging out together. So I'm like, man, this is crazy. We go inside and like needless to say, I had a great time. I didn't do any drugs my first night. I didn't get drunk or anything. I just danced, man. I had a good time. And I met a lot of great people. And I eventually fell in love with that scene, which got me into promotions. I started doing my own event. It was called the Friday Night Project, where once a month I was basically trying to get the club and the rave scene to come together because at that time it was separate. There was club nights and then there was like the rave nights. And I wanted to bring it together inside the club, like the ravers into the club because they didn't like to go to clubs. It was like too, I don't know, too bougie or it was too, we're underground. We're not going to go to that stuff, that kind of thing. So I did that. That was 2010, February 5th, 2010. I threw my first event, filled the place up, hit capacity. It was like 300 people at the time. Not a lot, but in Winnipeg, that's a lot to bring out. Um, and then I did that for about a year or so. And that was probably, even up until now, the funnest and most peaceful, less like stressful time of my life was in the rave scene for like those 2 years. Great people, made some money, had a lot of fun, didn't have any problems. And then eventually I stopped doing it. Let's say 2000, I want to say I probably got out around 2013, 2014, a few years later. And I basically went from there to homeless. So,
There to
yeah,
homeless?
yeah.
What
So
what
I
what happened there?
so I exit the scene and I'm working at a good company. It's a call center, but they pay good wages at that time. And I really like the job. I could never hold a job, by the way, this whole time, like all my early teenage years into early adult years, or sorry, late teenage into early adult, because again, just the authority thing and not wanting to be told what to do and losing interest, whatever it was. So
Sounds
I'm
like
working at this.
Sounds like you.
Yeah,
sorry.
exactly.
Sounds
To
like
this guy
sounds
over
like John Boziak.
there. So, what ends up happening is basically, like, I'm working at this good job, I love it there, and then I get involved with someone that's married, and it started like, it never really progressed into anything, but it just became an uncomfortable situation for me. She started showing up where I was, she wanted to be around my scene because I was still hanging out with some of the guys and stuff, and she had never seen that. She had never been to, like, clubs or in the hood or house parties or anything like that. So every once in a while I'd go out and I was bringing her out as a friend. But she was going through marriage troubles at the time. And I thought nothing of it. I thought we were friends. She was a really good looking woman, like 6'2", blue eyes, blonde hair, like Swedish, like really beautiful woman. So in my mind, I thought I don't have a chance with this woman. So it was always in the back of my head. We're just friends. We're hanging out. She likes the scene, whatever. But I guess she she was the type of woman that was dependent on a man.
Mhm.
So when she knew that she was leaving the marriage, like I didn't come to realize this till later, but I think when she knew that she was leaving the marriage, she needed somewhere to go and she needed someone to take care of her. She sees me, I treated her well. I was nice. She has a good time around me and she knew how I was with women as well cuz she had seen me date other girls and whatever. So she thinks I'm a safe bet. But I had no interest in that and it ended up getting like I said, really weird. I wanted to stop hanging out with her completely, and unfortunately, we work together in the same area. She's like right next to me, so every day that I'm not answering the phone or not answering the texts or ignoring her at the club, I got to hear about it the next day. So I asked to be moved around. I asked my supervisor, and he just kind of laughs at me. You know what I mean? He's like, it's not that serious. And I'm like, look, man. And I even showed him messages like 13 missed calls and stuff like that. And she's like, "Isn't she married?" I'm like, "Yeah, exactly. So move me, like get me out of here." He wouldn't move me. So I told him, I literally told him to go himself and I quit. And that was kind of my attitude throughout the most of my life because we didn't get into this, but there were plenty times where like the system failed me, where I was trying to do the right thing and I ended up getting consequences because of it. You know what I mean? Like I could have easily, went and gotten her in trouble or called the police or whatever I had to do. But I was like, no, I'm going to take it to him. He'll do the right thing. Didn't happen. Happened with me in my childhood too. I was abused at one of my elementary schools and I went forward to the principal and I made a big thing about it. And my parents were never alerted, were never told, and they never called the police. Like stuff like that would happen throughout my whole life. And this was the time I just gave up. So I walked away from that job and I literally decided within about a week or so that I was going to be homeless. And it was like, it's very strange when I explain this to people because I was not your typical homeless. So what I mean by that is like I could have stayed with other people, I could have stayed with friends, family, whoever. I was not on drugs, I had no alcohol problems, no gambling issues, none of that stuff. Not to say that everyone there is going through that, but the majority are. So I end up deciding I need a break. I don't want to work right now. I don't want to take orders from people. I'm tired. And, I'd lost my mom a couple years earlier. My dad's not around. We kind of jumped past that, but 2010 February when I threw that first event, 9 months later I lost my mom. So that same year I lost my mom, my dad's not around. So I was just tired, man. I felt like I'm done with this. I just want a break. So my goal was to go to this shelter and literally just for like a week or two, just like sleep, go to bed at a regular hour, eat 3 meals a day, take care of myself properly, and just kind of like decompress from everything that's happened in my life. What ends up happening while I'm there, a couple of big major key events. So one is obviously I get healthier, I get happier, I get focused on what I want to do later when I leave. And then I also meet someone that changes my life completely. And with him I enter the criminal world, more of the underworld though. So he was an Italian guy from Quebec that was hiding out. Now, I didn't know this when I first met him. We just kind of sparked a conversation because he saw me wearing an Italia jersey or something like that one day. And he started talking to me in his language, and I didn't understand it because my Italian's terrible, but he speaks Sicilian, which is a different dialect, and I can't understand any of that. But regardless, just that kinship, he's like, oh, you're Italian, I'm Italian, whatever. So he was an older guy. He was probably about 60 years old. And I just made it a point to check in with him every day. We would eat together, we would talk as much as we could with his, his French, Sicilian, Italian words that he'd throw in with the English. And we just became good friends. And he was a little bit unhealthy. He's had a terrible cough that sounded like he was going to drop half the time. He had, full set of dentures. He would even talk to himself a few times too. So I kind of thought maybe he's not well. Maybe he's a little crazy. He's definitely unhealthy, but whatever. It helped me pass the time having that responsibility of taking care of someone again, which is what I was used to doing. So I remember some of his stories weren't adding up when I asked him why he was there. One time he's there to collect money from an author that owes him money for a book that he wrote, and then another time it's like a completely different fabricated story. So I'm
Wait, but he's
constantly
homeless. He's in the shelter.
he's sheltered, yeah. But
Okay.
keep in mind he's from Quebec. He's from, like, basically Montreal, but he's in my city, Winnipeg, like a smaller
Yeah.
city, homeless. So it's like, "Why are you here?" And he one thing he did admit to is he came here from Quebec, and he went
Okay.
straight to the shelter. So, at the time, though, there was a huge bust on organized crime in Ontario and Quebec. I forget exactly what it was called, but you can look it up in I think it's 2015, if I'm right about the timeline. There was a huge bust where I think it's called Scope Operation Scopa or something like that. And yeah, they did a bunch of arrests in Italy, Quebec, and Ontario. And this was right around the time that guy shows up. So I kind of thought maybe that was it because his stories didn't make sense. But I never brought it up. One day, however, we're sitting at the table and this story is probably the most unbelievable part of everything I'm about to tell you, to be honest. I think a lot of people have a tough time realizing that this happened. This is my opinion of what it was. So I told you he had dentures. One day I see him eating, and I would help him with his dentures. Sometimes they'd just like fall out, and I'd go clean them for him or whatever. Right? It was just that kind of relationship. So I came back, put the dentures on the table. He's eating, and then I start looking at his fingers, his hands, and I noticed that like something's wrong with them. Like the way that your fingertips are on your finger, it's pretty like easy to see a pattern and everything like that. And it's like his was missing. It was almost like it was just like bone, like on all of his fingertips. And it looked like a burn mark or something like that. So in my mind, I thought that he had them dipped. So there's guys that I don't know if you've ever heard of this in all of your stories, but like with other guests, but some people, to avoid being verified or caught, will get dentures, obviously plastic surgery, everyone knows that, but then also burning the fingertips with like acetone or whatever it's called
Right.
because it helps with the fingerprints. So my mind went to that. I don't know where I saw it. I don't know if I saw it in a movie or something when I was younger or what it was, or if I heard it in a true crime story, whatever it was. But remember, we got this weird story. It's like he's on the run. It feels like he's on the run, and then the dentures and the fingertips. So whatever, whoever he was, whatever he was, he did end up being somebody. So I never confirmed whether that was the case or not with the fingertips and the dentures, but I still today think that's what it was. So 5 months goes by, 5 or 6 months. I'm not really doing anything at this point. I think I was looking for work. I was hanging out. I was just, relaxing, and I'd spend my time at the shelter hanging out with people like him. And one day I bump into him while he's walking down the street, and he tells me he's going home. And I said, did is everything okay? Like, did you get what you needed? And he's like, everything is good. Thank you. He just said thank you for taking care of me. Thanks for putting up with me. He's kind of joking. Thanks for not making fun of me every time my dentures fell out, and just listening to this old no, he calls himself a no, right? Like grandpa, ramble about, everything. He's like, I'll never forget what you did for me. So we exchange information, and he says, you're a loyal guy. You've got a good heart, and you're a bravo ragazzo, which means you're a good boy. He's like, I'm gonna have work for you in the future. Somebody's gonna reach out to you, somebody from back home for me, so Quebec, and it's up to you whether you want to go forward with it, but it'll change your life. You'll make a lot of money, and you'll be a part of something bigger than yourself. I said, okay. And keep in mind, I'm still homeless at this time. This is probably around September 20 yeah, 2014 or 2015. One of those 2 years. And I eventually get out of homelessness. I think I got a job and I got an apartment set up for myself. And then a month or 2 later, in November, around my birthday, I get a phone call, and it's from someone with a Quebec accent, with a French accent, French Canadian accent. He tells me that he's a friend of the old man, that he knows it's around my birthday, happy birthday, and that he's gonna be at Winnipeg Airport, 3 hours from now. He was at the airport in Montreal. He's heading to Winnipeg. It's about a 3-hour flight. He's like, meet me at this place. And he says this place that's probably 2 or 3 blocks away from the airport. So I immediately knew this guy knows my city because where he said specifically, only the locals know to go to this place. So he's obviously spent time there. Now, I end up going and I meet him. I take a taxi over there, get out the taxi, pay the taxi driver, let him go. The guy shows up, and he introduces himself as a friend of the old man, hands me 2 different envelopes. He says, "This is for your birthday, and this is for everything that you did for the old man, just a little gift." Okay, no problem. Hands me the other one. He says, "This is like your," I forget what he said exactly. It was like your employment letter or something like that, right? And I was like, "Okay." So he's like, "Take that, think about it, get back to me. I'll be here for a couple days. Let me know what you decide." Say, "Okay." I call another taxi, get into the taxi, walk up a block, get into it, and then I look inside the envelopes. I look inside the gift envelope. It's a few $1,000s, I think around 3,800 bucks. I always to this day say there was probably 5 grand and the guy took 1,200 for himself because
Right.
that's what typically happens when people hand out gifts like that. And then in the other envelope, There was just it was almost like Scribble, and it was like a list of names, phone numbers, addresses, and amounts, dollar amounts. So some of them were as small as like $1,000, and some of them were like 10, 15,000. And I kind of already knew what it was, but I when I met this guy, this was the first time that I met. Like at the time, I didn't know this, but he's like a real mafioso. You know what I mean? We have wise guys in my city, but this was like someone from Quebec or from Ontario. They're a little bit different. Winnipeg is a small city. It's quiet. You don't have loud guys like that, and just his presence was something else.
Well, why was he in a homeless facility if he had this kind of money? Like, why wouldn't he have gone to a hotel or rented someplace, or why is he there?
Yeah, so keep in mind the guy that I met later on, like at the airport or near the airport, that's his friend. That's not him. First
No,
of
no,
all,
I
but the
understand
other
that.
guy,
Yeah, I'm saying the old man, why was he in that sorry, thought I thought I said that. Yeah, yeah, why was the old man like, if the old man can provide you like, obviously, the old man gave him money, gave him all that. Like, if he's in that position to have a guy fly in and give you cash, why was the old man in the homeless facility?
because he was on the run.
Of
So I found out later, probably 5 years later, 6 years later, through contacts that I made later on, that he wanted to make it appear to the authorities that he left from the East Coast on a boat. Okay. So they basically set it up because when they did that sweep, he was one of the people that they were after, but they never caught him. So he made it appear as if he went back to Italy or something. Like he leaves from like Halifax, Nova Scotia or whatever, and he's on they had a ticket with his name on it and everything like that. Made it look like he left. So they don't think of him anymore. So then he goes, I don't know why he didn't go to Ontario, probably because that there was heat there too. Winnipeg, I also learned this later on, was a place that a lot of Canadian gangsters were hiding out, not specifically Winnipeg, but my province, like my state of Manitoba. It's actually got a long history of people hiding out there from other parts of Canada, and I guess because it's central and because it's quiet and it's kind of away from the coasts and the real strong arm of the RCMP and everybody else. So that's the reason why. And keep in mind, like a lot of these old school guys, I'm talking about the 60-year-old, 65-year-old Italians and stuff, they're like really when it comes to like hiding and stuff like that, some of these guys like hide out in caves and like underground bunkers, and like they'll live in the mountains with nothing. You know what I
right.
mean? So I don't think this was a big deal for him to stay at the shelter. And add on to the fact that probably a lot of people saw him talking to himself in Sicilian and stuff like that. They probably thought he was a nut too. You know what I mean? So at the shelter, it's like he was covered there.
Okay.
Anyways, this guy, I end up contacting him back, and I basically say, like, once I made my mind up, I call him from a payphone, and I say, "Is this what I think it is?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Can you handle that? Can you take care of it?" I said, "Sure."
And what
And
is it? It's a list of people that owe money?
that's yeah. So I didn't know what it was for in the beginning, specifically what the debts were, but I guess some of these guys had some business in my city, so they might have dropping off a couple packs. It was different. Some guy would owe for a loan that he borrows 20 grand and he's paying 2 points every week or whatever it is, and then you have people that are like obvious. Quebec is like a hub when it comes to cocaine, right? So a lot of the good stuff comes from the East Coast. So there'd be guys that would buy, a couple kilos in my city or whatever else. I was never told exactly what it was. It's not like this guy owes for this, but I would ask them sometimes. So I got into it, and it's nothing like the movies. It's very, it's not exaggerated like that. I never beat people up. I never had a gun with me. I was most of the time I wasn't even knocking on doors. I would give someone a phone call. I'd say, you owe 15 G's. You haven't paid for 2 months. I need something right now. Like, I need to go tell these guys that you're trying at least. Sometimes I would collect all the money. Sometimes I'd get, you know, a little bit. Most of the time, I collected something though. There's only a couple of times where we had to call somebody else, and these guys were always dealing with bikers, right? So they were the muscle. Most of the time, the Italians that I was dealing with, at least, unless it was a personal beef or a vendetta or something like that, they're going to outsource to either a street gang or the bikers, typically, especially in Canada. Bikers are always been known to be more of the enforcers, especially for other groups, right?
Right.
So I don't know if it's like that in the States, but they're the guys that they're like more the facilitators and the distributors out here. I don't know how it is over there, but
Yeah.
I didn't
I don't
spend a
know.
lot of time in the States. But anyways, so I get into these debt collections. I'm doing it a couple of times a month. I'm not doing it. It's not a full-time gig. It's whenever they accumulate a list, they give it to me, and at that time I'm taking 10% of everything I collect, right? So if I collect 100K over the month or whatever, I'm making 10 grand. Um I do that for about, I want to say, about a year, and then I start feeling, I don't know what to call it, maybe paranoia, because I get a lot of people telling me that like I'm doing a good job and that, I'm going to start moving up soon, and maybe they're going to start asking me to do other things. And at the same time, some of their guys that were collecting in Quebec were getting robbed by like Haitian drug dealers and stuff like that. So they told me that they wanted me to carry a piece, which I had never done the whole time. I wasn't comfortable with that, and I wasn't making nearly enough money. I was making good money, like at least between five and $15,000 every month, just doing a couple hours of work, basically. But I wasn't gonna go to jail or kill somebody for that low of an amount of money. I mean,
Right.
technically, I'm still extorting, and I can still go to jail for stuff like that, but in my mind, I don't know these things yet. I'm not that well versed in law and stuff like that at that time. So I'm thinking like, man, the minute I carry a gun, this becomes a different thing. So
Right.
I wasn't interested. So before they came to me, I was also told that they were going to ask me, one of my friends told me that they're probably gonna ask you to start moving weight. They're gonna probably start getting you to put, flood the streets with the stuff that they have over there, which I've told you I did not like. I was not interested in being a drug dealer at all. I didn't like the violence, I didn't like the stress, the cops, everything else that comes with it. So, before they came to me, I decided to get out. So I basically told the guy that I connected with originally from Quebec, I said, "Listen, man, like I've been doing this for about a year or so. I've never been anywhere before. I've never traveled. I'm 28, 20 at that time, probably 26 years old, 27 years old, and I've never really left the country. Like I want to go travel and just basically, have a good time." So I get the permission, more or less. I decide to start traveling, and in those travels the following year, every once in a while I get hit up. "Hey man, do you want to, I got a big one for you. It's like a quarter mil. You want to go make a quick 25 grand?" Okay, so every once in a while I would do it, maybe once every couple of months. I had saved a little bit of money because that year that I was doing it, I made about 150K, which is more money than I'd ever seen in my whole life, right? So I saved a little bit of it, and then I would do these little odd jobs every once in a while. And I was also doing these little stupid scams, man. Like you coming from where you come from and what you did, you're gonna find this so stupid. But the way we started was with blank envelopes, cashing blank envelopes. So we'd pay like homeless guys to go. This was really stupid and really petty, but it's how it started. So we would take a blank envelope, get someone to go cash it on their bank account, and then at that time you type in like whatever's supposed to be on the check, $1,000, $1,300 or whatever. They'd pull it, whatever it was. We'd give them like $100, $200, more than happy to take that $200. We take the rest. We're doing like little stupid things like that throughout the year. Every once in a while, just get a couple bucks. But I decide at the end of that year, I went to a couple places. I was in Mexico, Puerto Rico, Chile, and New York. But nothing's really happening out there. I'm not doing any crimes. I'm not meeting any real serious people or anything like that. Not during that year. Keep in mind, this is 2016 now, just for the timeline. 2017 January, I decide to go to Italy. That's where I get introduced to a whole completely different world. So, in that trip, I tell the guy, we'll call him Luigi. I tell Luigi I'm going to Italy. And, where should I go? What should I check out? Who should I connect with? I'm very excited for this because I have an Italian background. I've never been to Italy. This is the whole, roots trip. So I call him and he's like, listen, when you get there, go to Milan and contact this guy. Make sure that you get a phone. I already knew about burner phones and stuff like that out there. He told me where to go get one, blah, blah, blah. I call this guy after a few days, meet up with him. And that was probably the most, even going forward up until now, most intense meeting of anybody that I've ever had in my life. So I end up meeting with this guy. Again, I don't know this at the time. I think this guy is just like a friend of a friend. He's going to show me what nice restaurants to go to, whatever else. I meet up with him, Calabrian guy, stocky. He's probably about in his 40s, leather jacket, nice cologne, gold rings, like just, this guy smelt like money and danger, you know what I mean? So, I'm sitting there and he just starts drilling me like a drill sergeant, He's like, "Where are you from?" He's like, "Who are you with? How do you know him? What are you doing for him? What do you know about me? What are you doing here in Milan?" All this shit, man, and it was intense. And luckily I told myself as soon as he started asking questions, I said, just answer truthfully. Like I'm talking to myself. Just tell him everything truthfully because you don't want problems with this dude. So after him grilling me for God knows how long, half an hour, 45 minutes, I guess he liked me and he started opening up and he's like, me and my family, we have this nice little pocket in this neighborhood. You're a friend of Luigi. You're welcome here. If you have any problems, let me know. Go check out this place. Da, 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 da. We end up meeting that same year, probably 5 or 6 different times, mostly in Italy. Through meeting with him and getting closer with his family, I start learning about everything else. Okay. So keep in mind, this time I've left debt collections. I'm doing these stupid little scams. I've got a little bit of money. I'm traveling, but I got nothing really going on. Now, what I end up doing is having conversations with one of his friends who's a Lebanese guy from Panama. Guy's got real estate, he's got restaurants, he's rich. Keep in mind, this family that I'm now friends with in Milan, these guys are loaded. So I find out later on they were one of the biggest distributors of in Milan, and they also obviously they have roots in Calabria. The Calabrians are known for being the biggest importers in Europe, and they have businesses and they do money laundering and everything else. I slowly get to learn some of that. I don't get to learn specifics, obviously, because I'm a nobody, but I get the gist of it. So I end up becoming friends with this Lebanese guy. He starts talking to me about Panama. I've never been to Panama. I've never been to Central America. At that time, I told you I went to Chile and I'd went to like Puerto Rico and stuff, but I never really explored Latin America. So throughout that year, I'm going back and forth to Europe maybe 4 times, spending about a month or 2 there each time. I'm visiting probably that year, probably about 10 different countries, but most of my time is spent in Italy or London. I end up getting into towards the end of the year, towards the end of 2017, I get into identity theft. And I was a broker. That was it. I wasn't stealing people's information. I was selling it. And that's not to make light of it, but I don't know a lot of the technical aspects about this. This job was basically given to me by some Chinese gangsters out here in Canada that were already making way too much money, and this was too small for them. So I'm friends with one of these guys. He basically gets lists of credit card information, just like you can buy on the dark web. The
Right.
difference is this information is coming from an actual bank teller. So this is somebody that's inside the bank that has information in regards to credit card information, banking account information, all this kind of stuff.
So it's solid.
It's
So it's not
100%
it's not
solid.
hit or miss. It's
It's
it's all hit.
e exactly, and a lot of people questioned that when I first brought it up. They're like, "Why wouldn't they just buy it off the dark web?" It's like, well, not every time that you buy something off the dark web, it's good. You know what I
Right.
mean? And if you buy a list of names, a credit card information off the dark web, not all the credit cards are going to work either, right? So you wasted your money a little bit. So I found out that this Chinese guy had connections in London with Albanians and Nigerians, these gangs that were out there, really heavy guys. And these guys had like basically factories inside of apartments where they were making and printing credit cards, and they were doing stuff with, Bitcoin, and how the whole thing works. Now, I basically would do this maybe, well, that year I did it 4 times because I went back to Europe 4 times, but I would sell these USB sticks for around 15,000, like 10 to 15,000 pounds. Okay. But it would have 1,000 names on it. And it could be from, it wasn't just one bank that we were dealing with either. We had connections in other banks, but we went through, we sold the first one. I think, yeah, I got 8,000 pounds because that's all I could take with me at the time. It's just like US or Canada. You're not allowed to have 10,000 cash on you, right? More than 10,000 cash.
Right,
So
between countries.
exactly. So and I was going back home with cash. But the good thing was I would always stop in London before I went everywhere else. So this is part of my strategy, okay? I didn't realize it in the beginning. I wasn't smart or anything, but it did become a strategy later on where the first place I would go to as I went into Europe was always London. And the reason why is so that I could drop off this USB stick, I could get my cash, and now I've got that cash for the trip. So if I'm staying out in Europe or London or wherever else, UK, for a month, I've now got like, 8,000, 10,000, 15,000 pounds on me. I'm good for the month. I'm good for 2 months. I can pay all my stuff with cash, which is what I preferred to do. One thing, I don't want to get too far ahead with this, but one thing, the reason why I never got caught for anything that I did, I believe, is because I didn't have a digital trace. So any money that I made overseas, whether it was in Panama, London, or other stuff that we'll talk about later on, I never had a single dirty dollar from another country touch my bank account here in Canada. And I really liked to deal with cash, exactly how I'm telling you right now. It made things so much easier. So this Lebanese guy tells me about Panama, and then I do this year of going to Europe, and I'm doing these little things with the USB, and I'm not really making serious money. Tens of thousands of dollars, okay, but not hundreds of thousands yet. I hadn't gotten to that point. But towards the end of the year, I get control of a CFO. So basically, I was sold some information about someone inside my country, in a different part of the country, that was a CFO in a company that was completely corrupt and just being used for everything you could imagine. So what had happened is the owners of this company fell into debt with the mob, millions of dollars. This degenerate brother just ended up, I guess, racking up some crazy debt that he could never pay back. And the organization started taking money from it. So they would set up payable accounts, they would make fake sales, bill of sales, they would do all kinds of stuff. For me, the reason why I wanted access to this is because it was a way for me to get clean money, basically. Because I'm taking, like, it's embezzling and it's whatever else, but it was from a clean company and a clean source in Canada, right? So I could have the money pulled out in cash, or I could send it to another bank account and have it pulled, whatever. So I pay for this information to get to the CFO. And what this information is, I haven't really talked about this before in detail, but the CFO also used to work in a prison and was smuggling drugs into the prison. The prison caught them doing this. It was a group of them. And instead of, giving them any time or, any kind of criminal charges or anything, they just got fired, which is
Right.
mind blowing. So 4 or 5 of them get fired, and it was a woman, the CFO, had information, a ton of different information on other things that were going on inside the jail. Not really going to talk about it, but it was not drug related or anything like that. It was like some scandals, some sexual stuff, and with the COs and stuff like that. So we had all this information, and we had emails from her to somebody else, and blah blah blah. Ended up extorting. Okay, we extort her. I get an account set up for my account that is disguised as an insurance account. Through this account, I start regularly getting deposits of anywhere between $5,000 and $13,000 a week. So by the end of that first month, I'm doing like around $40,000 just from the embezzlement from this place. 'Kay? Okay. 'Kay? Okay. 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 And that's where my life jumped ahead, because even on a good month with the debt collections, I could make like 15,000, but now all of a sudden I'm up to 40. And like it might not sound like a lot to some people, but
Sounds
jumping
like a
from
lot to me.
15 to 40, yeah, it changes your lifestyle completely, you know? So then I start traveling even more, obviously, because I have the money. That was my thing. I didn't buy houses, I didn't buy jewelry, I didn't buy designer clothing, none of that shit. I traveled like absolutely crazy all year, all the time. So remember, I'm introduced this idea of Panama. So going into 2019, I've I'm now I'm in, full force with the embezzlement. I've got a couple of other little things going on. I'm regularly making 30 to $50,000 a month. April 2019, I go to Panama.
Okay.
When I get to Panama, the first thing I do is go get a safety deposit box. So there was a woman that was working inside one of the banks that was a friend of ours, and she would get you a deposit box. And you never had to go into the bank. It was all lock and key. You held on to the key. She had an extra, and you could deposit whenever you wanted. My situation was a little bit different from other people's, where her nephew happened to work in the hotel I stayed at every time I went to Panama City. So what I would do is I would call 3 days ahead. Hey, I'm coming out to Panama. I need to deposit 5 grand, 8 grand, 10 grand, whatever. Have your nephew come up and see me on this day. Da da da. So the nephew is working in a restaurant in a hotel that I stay at. So I order room service. I ask for blank, whatever his name is. He comes up, and I either take money that I'm pulling out, which I never did. I always deposited, or I deposit. So through this, I start saving some money. Just 5 grand here, 10 grand here whenever I'm in Panama, which ends up being a lot like Europe. I'm there 4 times a year. So I'm dropping off that amount of money. And this is just, I don't know, like a nest egg, like savings, like just in case something happens, if I'm in Colombia or wherever else, and like, I'm in a tight in a jam, I have 20 grand or 30 grand, 50 grand I can go grab, right? So now on to the next part, the next stage of the life. I meet a girl there. There's always a girl. We we were gonna get there. She's Nicaraguan. She's Nicaraguense. She's from Nicaragua. She lives in Panama. I meet her almost immediately going into Panama. I fell in love with her right away. She was just this fun, short, cute girl, and we had a good time. And we end up deciding to stay together and to move to Nicaragua, which I do. About a month or two later, I moved down to Nicaragua. Keep in mind, this is 2019, and had my whole time out there. Now, in between that, I'm still doing everything that I'm doing. I'm still embezzling. I have the deposit box. And then I've also now met the Lebanese guy, which I mentioned earlier, who's doing money laundering in Panama. And he tells me about this sweet system that they have set up. And this is probably going to be the most interesting part for you, I think, of the whole story. So pay attention to this one. You can tell right away whether this is bullshit or whether this is real. You'll know. He tells me they have a real estate company that they're using out there. They've set up this project, which is basically glass house condos. Okay. So they've bought in the land, they've gotten all the permits and everything. Everything is, good to go. They start building the foundation. But really, this whole thing is a scam from the beginning. It's never gonna go up. They lay the foundation, they start putting cement in, they get all the paperwork done, but it's never actually going to be built. And everyone is in on this. People from city officials to some cartel members in Colombia to Italians from Toronto. There's a bunch of people that are involved in this, okay? And basically this is what the setup is. There's a company that in Ontario that has a good relationship with the bank in Panama, the Global Bank and a couple of other ones, and a couple of Canadian banks that are operating inside of Panama. So there's an account that's basically used to clean the money. The easiest way, I'm going to say this the most simple way. Someone in Canada, someone in Toronto, a drug dealer, whatever's got $250,000 he wants sent over. He either wants it cleaned so he can take out in cash, or he just wants to buy some real estate overseas and have it go through a couple shell companies. He goes to this guy in Ontario, a real businessman, takes the cash to him, gets dinged on it 25% of whatever he's bringing in. It was usually 25%, whatever it was. $1 million, $5 million, $250,000, always 25%. Now, what ends up happening is he'll send it over and it'll get turned into a purchase order for one of these glass house condos for 125 grand, 180 grand, whatever it is. Again, bill of sale is made. Everything looks legit on the Panamanian bank side, on the Ontario side. And throughout the process, the guy in Ontario's already got his money, his dirty cash put away, and he's doing whatever with it. I don't ask. I imagine they have casinos out there, VLT machines, whatever it is. I don't ask about that. But he introduces me to this idea. He's like, you know, anyone in Canada that wants to clean money, you can make money off this. It'll be just like the debt collections. You can get 10% of whatever you pull in. Now, 10% of 25 grand is $2,500. 10% of 250,000, and 200, you know the math,
Yeah.
$25,000. But now we're not doing anything for less than half a million or a million. So if I do this 3 or 4 times a year, I'm getting 50 grand here, boom, 100 grand here, boom. I've already got the insurance company set up. I've got the Canadian company that we're using also to send out, fake work orders and everything else. So I've got everything set up for myself. 2019, I'm in Nicaragua. I'm living there. We rented a house. Everything is on autopilot. I don't even have to do anything at this point. Now, the relationship is short-lived, so maybe 9 months, 10 months. It was beautiful, though. I loved living in a dictatorship country. It was very interesting. You can imagine just seeing, like, military police in the streets all the time, but at the same time, I don't know how much you've traveled in those parts of the world. These places are beautiful, they're affordable, and the people are actually extremely kind. So, like, I had a great time while I was there, even though it was, short-lived. Now we'll get up going from Nicaragua. We go into, let's say, November, December. We break up. I go back to Panama. I'm kind of fucked up because I'm like, I just spent the last 9 months investing in this woman, investing in getting a house, all this shit. And it just all fell apart. I felt like shit. So I went to Panama. I do what most men do, turned into a slut, went and fucked a bunch of girls in Panama. And I was drinking, and I had friends come in from Canada and other places to come see me. And I'm just living in a hotel at this point for about a month. January 2020, I go back home. Again, everything is pretty much on autopilot. Nothing's really going on. Around March, April, COVID hits. And man, it was miserable because keep in mind, I had just come from this breakup and I still kind of felt a little shitty. And now I'm trapped inside by myself all the time and I can't go anywhere. I can't travel anywhere. And I really tried to hold off on the vaccines. I'm not going to lie. For like 5 or 6 months, I tried to stay away from getting vaccinated. And then I was like, man, I need to get the fuck out of this city. I need to go somewhere. So I start traveling again. I won't tell you about the whole year because I can already tell. I'm gonna put you to sleep right away.
No, well, first of
It's
all,
a
I'm
long
wondering,
story.
did you get vaccinated? So you did get vaccinated.
I did, yeah. I had
You get
to.
and then you got a little. Did they give you the little card like they gave you here in the U.S.?
Exactly, yeah. And you know what? I probably in hindsight, I probably could have avoided it because I had friends that were making fake ones and they were getting away with it.
Right.
So at first they didn't have the cards, they just had a piece of paper and we had counterfeit guys that could do anything. So, they were making those sheets and people were traveling with them, right? So fast forward maybe halfway into the year, I start traveling. Mexico opens up first, I believe. So I go to Mexico for a little bit, see my brother out there who had, moved there a couple of years early and basically settled down, spend some time with him. I go to Costa Rica and then I go to Ecuador. And I'm getting through all this because there's certain places that are just a little bit more important than others. Ecuador was important because it introduces me to the idea of Colombia. Colombia is probably the most important part of this whole story for me, anyways. 2020, towards the end of the year, December, I'm in Ecuador, I'm in Quito. I get a phone call from one of my buddies in Canada. And this is one guy that was really struggling with the pandemic. Like, this was the guy that's sending me articles every single day about COVID and the pandemic. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
he's just watching the news constantly and just going crazy. He's sending me this shit, sending me. He's like, bro, I need to get the out of here. Do you want to go to Colombia? He's like, where are you right now? I'm like, I'm in Ecuador. And I'd never been to Colombia and I heard amazing things about it. So I said, yeah, why not? So we had a friend in Winnipeg that was a Colombian national. and she basically says, "Hey, look, I know you guys are going to Bogota, but why don't you come meet me in Cartagena?" And if you know anything about Cartagena and Bogota, Bogota is just in the capital city in the middle of the country, kind of cold, lots of shopping, lots of food and clubs and stuff, but like not the best weather. So she's like, "Come to the coast, come to Cartagena. It's like Cancun on steroids, like this little town in Colombia." So I said, "Why not?" So January 2021, I go down there. I arrive by myself first in Colombia. I spend a couple days in Bogota. I go to Medellin, not doing anything, just hanging out, shopping, eating, chilling, getting to know the country. Then I go to Cartagena. I'm there for a day or two. Then my friends start arriving in. So the friend that called me, he arrives first about 2 days in. Then I got some other friends from Calgary, a different part of Canada, that come in and meet us. And then the Colombian national shows up all over these days. But the second night that I was there, or third night that I was there, when my Cuban friend arrives, this is the guy that was going crazy. We go out because I'm like, let's go check out some spots. Let's see where we're gonna take everybody. So we went to this little bar slash hookah lounge. We had a great time. We got drunk. We're dancing. We're meeting people. The Colombian national, her brother shows up. We have a good time. We start connecting with these people from Cali, from Bogota, just by partying. Nothing serious. Regular people. Now, the club or the lounge, whatever you want to call it, it closes at midnight because it's COVID, right? So even though places are open, everything shuts down. The whole town shuts down at midnight. So at midnight, we go to leave. We're all drunk. We're all having a good time. Nobody wants to go home. There's some guy standing outside, and he's like, "Hey, you guys looking for somewhere to go?" It's like, obviously we are. Sketchy as hell. And normally I would be like, no, but these guys were like, you know what? Let's keep it going. So I said, fine. I don't want to ruin your vacation. So we get in a taxi. We head to this place that looks like, absolutely nothing, like almost like a storefront from outside. We walk in, and we didn't know this at the time, but those taxis were owned by the club. So we go
Okay.
inside. There's a madam there. She's probably about 60 years old, 55 years old. She greets us. We pay whatever the entrance fee is or whatever. Then two big guys come and pat us down. And I could already tell this is an intense place, you know what I mean? Just by the guys that patted us down. I'm like, "Hey,
Is
this
it a
is."
brothel?
Yeah. You jumped ahead there, but yeah, it's a brothel. So but we didn't know that, man. We literally thought we're going to a club because that's what he told us, like, "Oh, we're going to after hours." Okay, let's go. So we walk in, we go through a couple of curtains and down some stairs and through this maze, and then at the end there's another curtain. We open it, and then all of a sudden it's like this outdoor nightclub. Like there's no roof to the place, and it's got like a swimming pool in the middle with a catwalk that goes over it and a stripper pole going up the middle. All along the pool side, there's these beautiful leather couches, and there's suites upstairs. There's a DJ area. There's a restaurant area. It's intense. You could not tell from the outside that any of this was in here. And I guess that's the point, right? But yeah, we get in and it's dead. There's nobody there. So I talked to the guy that brought us there. I guess he's like the promoter for the place. I'm like, "Bro, like, what's going on here, man? Like, this is kind of stale, This is a cool spot, but like, no one here." Like, "Bro, we don't even open for another 30 minutes. We're just getting started." He's like, "But
Right.
check this out." And he goes over to the wall and he hits what looks like, like a fire alarm or something. And it goes off like this siren. And then all of a sudden, like 20 girls walk out. And they're all just like the best looking women you've ever seen in your life from Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, Colombia, Venezuela, everywhere. And we're just like, holy crap, because I'd never seen nothing like this. I had traveled and I'd been to bars and strip clubs and whatever else, but this was like, whoa, I'm in Colombia now. So we're having a good time. We're talking to some of the girls. The place starts filling up quickly. Like within an hour, it's completely full. There's probably 150 people there, like within an hour. Popular spot. So we're being sent girls, right? Come and talk us up and, go in with them or whatever. But the one thing I liked about this place is they give you, as soon as you sit down in this area, like kind of VIP area, they give you two security guards. Those guys stand in front of you all night. Now, if you have problems with another group, they'll take care of it. If the girls come to talk to you, those security guards are going to ask you first, can this girl come here and talk to you? I love that right away because it's like otherwise they're coming up to you every second and it gets annoying. You can't have fun. So at one point there's these two girls that me and a couple of my friends thought were cool. One was really hot, like I call it fake hot, fake tits, fake ass, hair down to the ankles, typical Colombian prostitute. And then the other one was like kind of quiet, shy, timid, just sweet girl. I said, let them in. We start hanging out with them, but the girl, the fake one, got sent to me because by this time I've ordered a bunch of bottles. I'm tipping like crazy. I'm being friends with the DJ, meeting the owner of the place. So I'm a target basically for these
Yeah.
girls. So they send this girl over to me and I'm not interested. It's not my type. But my buddy's into it. So I say, "Hey bro, switch with me real quick. I'm gonna sit with the other one." The other one is like I described, quiet, shy, wasn't impressed with anything that we were doing. Like a lot of these girls when they see money, they're like, "Oh, okay, jackpot." This girl's like, "Yeah, I don't give a fuck." You know what I mean? I like that. I was like, "Okay, this girl, like, she's not about that fake shit." So we start to talking, and I just kind of ask like, "What are you doing in this place? Like, you don't fit in here at all." You know what I mean? She's like, "I could say the same thing about you." I'm like, "What do you mean?" It's like, I've been watching you. Like, you're not interested in the girls or anything. What are you doing in a brothel?" I was like, I didn't know I was coming to a brothel. I didn't know until I got here. But you're absolutely right. This is not my scene at all. I'm just staying for my friends. We get to talking. She's like, "Look, I'm from Venezuela. Before I left, I was making $5 a month minimum wage. I got 2 girls to feed. Milk cost $20 because of inflation, and, she got groomed into going there. She wasn't told it was a brothel, she was told it was a nightclub and that, a lot of tourist dollars, and she'll make $1,000 a week, and by the time she gets there, bro, after going through the jungle on her feet, and then by feet, and then going in a little shitty boat to get to Colombia, she's defeated, right? So, first couple of days, she's serving, literally serving drinks. And then after that, the girl says, "Hey, look, if you want to make money, you got to go into the room with this guy." You know what I mean? And I honestly believe because of how sweet she was, I believe the story because it was like I could see you being manipulated. Like you're too nice out here. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
And a
anyways,
prostitute makes dramatically more money than a server.
oh, 100%, man. So just to break down, because I know people like numbers. At the time, so this is in 2021, at the beginning of 2021, when you go in with a girl, you're paying 300,000 Colombian pesos for 30 minutes. That's basically the equivalent of 80, 90 USD, 100 Canadian, 110 Canadian. And the girl, this is what surprised me about the place. So most of the time when girls are being pimped, the pimp is keeping everything.
Yeah.
In this place, they take like 60 or 70,000 pesos, and then the girl gets like 230 or 250 plus tips. So this was actually one of the nicer places where, first of all, the girls aren't forced to stay there. And second of all, they keep, I'd say, like 75 to 80% of everything that they make, which is unheard of, you know? So keep in mind, a girl goes in 3 or 4 guys a night. She's making like $400, $500 a night, coming from making $5 a month. It's ridiculous. So from there, we hang out, we have a good time. I start to like her a little bit. We get friendly, and I go back there for the next couple of days. Keep in mind, my friends are still arriving over the next few days, and every night we go back there, and I just loved being around her, man. I thought, like, man, this girl is amazing. I don't know why it took me till I was 32, 33 years old to meet someone like this in a place like this, in a country like this, but I started to grow feelings. So, um, a couple days in, I literally just told her, "I'm gonna get you out of here. I can tell that you're unhappy. I know that you're only here for money. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set you up with some money and get you back in Venezuela. We'll get a company set up for you, like a little market, street market or whatever, so that you have some money coming in for your girls." And she didn't believe me at all. She thought I was just like talking shit or whatever, but I was dead serious. So by the end of the week, I'd gotten an email. I thought I had way more time than I did, bro. I got an email telling me that they were shutting down flights between Latin America and Canada and the US as well. So
This
we
is for
basically had
COVID.
for
Or
COVID, yeah. Yeah, because the numbers were spiking again or whatever. So we basically had 3 days to get out of there. And I'm thinking, in at that point in time, I'm like, I'm gonna stay here for another month. You know what I mean? Like before I found out, I was like, I'm gonna stay here for another month and get to know this girl and see where this goes. I didn't have that kind of time. So a couple days later, you know, we went on. I'd say that the day after that, I told her that I'm taking her out of there, I went on a boat cruise with the promoter guy, the guy that brought me there in the first place, and a couple of the security guards. They were also Venezuelan. So I made friends with them and I basically asked them, listen, man, I want to take this girl out of here. Do you think it's going to be an issue for me? And they said, you know, honestly, we don't know. There's different situations for different girls, but you can talk to the boss and we'll see what happens. So fast forward, a couple days pass by. I have to leave the following day. So 3 o'clock in the morning, the guy comes up to me. He's like, "You want to talk to the boss?" I'm drunk. I'm making out with this girl. I'm not ready for this right now. But I was like, okay, you know what? This is the only time I can do it. So I end up going, talking to the guy. I find out that the place is owned by one of the cartels, right? And one of the probably the biggest one at the time that was out there in Colombia. Um, and I was, you know, I was worried what I was walking into, right? But by the end of the conversation, the guy realized that I was a good guy, that I had good intentions with her, and that she wasn't making any money for him because she didn't want to anybody and she didn't want to talk to guys. She would sit in a corner and just not want to be bothered. So he gave me the blessing. I go back to Canada. I quarantine for about 2.5 weeks. In that time, I send her to Bogota where I have some friends that will take care of her. She stays up at a hotel. She's good to go. She also meets up with her brother who's living in Bogota that she hasn't seen for like 5 years. It was a great little reunion for them. I do my quarantine in Canada. I spend a couple days with my friends. I go back to Colombia. I meet her in Bogota. And the same night that I was with her, the first night that I was with her, I ended up proposing to her on a balcony outside of a hotel in Bogota. So this is like 3.5 weeks after meeting. It was
Okay.
crazy how quickly it happened. But we had obviously talked while I was in quarantine. We talked every single day. And I basically said, "Look, I really like you. I think that there's, something special about you that I've been looking for in a woman for a long time." She had, minus the place that we met, her morals and her values and the way she carried herself were like old worldly. You know what I mean? Something that's missing from the woman of today. And you
Right.
only typically find that in a lot of foreign countries. It doesn't really exist here in North America anymore, bro. That's the
Right.
way I feel about it anyways. So, I basically told her like, "Look, I really like you and like I want us to be together, but you don't owe me anything. Like we can get you on a flight back to Venezuela. I'll get you set up. I'll put money in your bank account. You'll be good for the next year or two." You know what I mean? And she tells me like, "I'm not going anywhere. I'm in love with you. I want to see this through. You're an amazing guy." All the things that you'd want to hear from a woman that you like or that you're falling in love with. So that night at the hotel, the first night that I seen her after the trip, I was worried. I'm like, "Hey, is this real or is this fake?" I'm gonna know right away. So right when we met, I knew right away. You know what I mean? I opened the door. She comes, she jumps on me, she's crying. She told me how much she missed me and how long these 2 weeks felt and whatever else. And end of the night, I propose. Later on, we go to Bahamas. About 3 months later, we go to Bahamas because I'm trying to find somewhere for us to get married quickly
Right.
so that we can live together.
Well, okay. I mean,
Yeah.
are you expecting to bring her back to Canada? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. So my plan for that was I didn't know where we were gonna live yet, but I knew we had to get married. I was not planning on going to Canada because I didn't want that microscope on me. You know what I mean? I didn't want to apply for her to come and do all this shit with immigration and have to answer questions and have to, you know what I mean, finances looked at and everything like that. Like I covered my shit, but you never know. So it's like if I can avoid them looking at my life and just being in the shadows, I'm gonna do that. Obviously, we're not gonna go to Venezuela because it's at the time it's a shithole. There's a dictatorship. She's trying to leave there because it's so bad. So I don't know where we're gonna live yet. I just know we need to get married. So a couple of months later, after bouncing around a little bit, Colombia, seeing some of her family and whatever else, we go to Bahamas. We end up getting married. It was a beautiful. It was just me and her. We just eloped. It was a beautiful time out there. And then immediately, like the day after we got married, I get into like where are we gonna live mode. So I have a couple things set up for us over the next couple of months. So we get married June 12th, I believe, of 2001. Yep. And we
21?
yeah, 2021, sorry. Did I say 2001?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so 2021, we get married in June, and then we start bouncing around a little bit. We go see my brother in Mexico again. We go to Costa Rica as like a little honeymoon or whatever. And then throughout this whole time, I'm still doing everything I was doing before. It's still on autopilot. Every once in a while, I would have to go to Panama just to meet with somebody or to get money or to put money away. But other than that, I was basically just with her or I was back in Canada, like just waiting to go see her again, whatever it was. So I finally discover, though, Paraguay. So Paraguay ends up being the place that we decide to move to. Here's
Okay.
why. I'm going to break down why, because a lot of people are like, why Paraguay? I'm going to say this in the shortest form. It only takes 70 days to get your permanent residency in Paraguay, which is incredible. It's one of the fastest in the world. It's good for 10 years, which is also incredible because most places are 3 years, 4 years, maybe 5. This is good for 10. It's part of an agreement called the Mercosur, which is with Brazil and Argentina, which means if you have PR in Paraguay, you also have it in Brazil and Argentina and can move through those countries the same way.
What
So
what's PR?
permanent residence.
Okay.
Yeah. So you're not a citizen, you got the residence or whatever.
Okay.
So it's one of the greatest and fastest and cheapest in the world to go there. And I like that it gave you access to Brazil and Argentina because you can buy real estate, you can go to school, you can work there, whatever you want. And a personal favorite, no taxes on foreign income. Zero. That's also something that is almost unheard of. You're only
Right.
taxed in Paraguay if you make more than $30,000 in Paraguay. But anything that you make in Canada, Italy, US, wherever is zero tax,
So
right?
any money you bring in is perfectly legal. I mean, no,
100%.
tax-free, right?
Exactly. So for me, it was paradise. But the next thing that we needed to do is we needed to go see how it actually is. Great idea, but like, how does it look? How
Right.
are we going to feel out there? So November 2021, or maybe end of October, we head out there to Paraguay. The first day after arriving in the capital city, which is Asuncion, we fell in love with it. And I already knew that I was gonna like it because I'd spent 3 months, investigating and looking at pictures and all this other shit. But I didn't know if she was gonna like it, because she's got to leave her country. She's got to leave Venezuela. She's gonna bring her kids here eventually. So I'm really riding on this to be what she wants. And she loved it. And she's like, "This feels like home." And I was like, "Thank God." Like maybe 8 months after our meeting her, actually no, probably like 10 months after meeting her, we finally find where we're gonna live. We can stop bouncing country to country, living in hotels, all this other bullshit, and I can walk away from the game. This is an important part that I didn't bring up.
I
The
was gonna
minute
say,
I met her,
how? I was gonna say
how
how? How do you make money without committing
doing what
crime?
I'm doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had a
Like, how do you
plan.
afford a wife and with 2 kids on what else are you capable of doing at this point? You know what I mean?
Well, okay. So firstly, I just want to say right when I met her, I kind of basically knew that I was going to have to stop doing what I was doing eventually. And not just for her, but her kids. You got to keep in mind my whole life, my parents have passed away. I'm kind of on my own. I've got friends, I've got a little bit of family, but like I'm really on my own. But the minute that I meet her, now I'm responsible for her and her kids. So I don't want them to go through that. I don't want us to move to a foreign country. I'm still laundering money or doing identity theft or doing collections or whatever, get arrested, and then they're on their own in a foreign country.
Right.
So I already decided that this was going to happen. Now, what was I going to do? I had a couple of plans. So I had contacts with AT&T inside of Panama. There's basically, I'll give you the short version of it. Somebody that was from New York, these Jewish guys that I met in Panama from New York, they had a bunch of call centers over Central America, all over the place. And the way they broke it down to me was for like a short, investment, maybe depending where I was going. But in Paraguay, I had it down to $50,000 in investment. I had to basically get some Dell desktops, get some office space, and they would get us a contract for a year with AT&T, where basically AT&T was paying you like 750 USD to 850 USD per employee per month, and you're paying the employees the minimum wage or a little bit better, which is like 450 USD. So you're getting like almost half of that wage off of all of them.
Right.
The way that we had it planned out for was for 40 employees, 40 workers. So you can see what kind of money that is. It's in the tens of thousands a month.
Right.
So and that's a legitimate business. That's not there's nothing dirty about that. So that was one of my plans. I also this one's a little bit more it's more intricate, but they don't really have any English schools out there, not any really good ones. So I was thinking to do an English school. I wanted to get funding from the Catholic Church. It's the big long that one was like the dream. I was like, if I do this, I'm set for my life. So that probably wouldn't have happened, but I was gonna work on making it happen. And then I was gonna open up a little hookah lounge as well. I had an American guy that I met out there that was gonna sell me his hookah lounge, his business for around like 35, 40K. It was bringing in a couple of grand every month. So I already had things set up. So we're in Paraguay. We spent about a month there. My birthday passes there. One of the best birthdays ever. She sets up this whole thing for me and, like happy birthday. And one of the regular spots that we used to hang up with, they decorated and all this stuff. And she surprised me. And it was kind of nice, because just coming from everything that we went from, you never know, like if this is real, if this is true, if I'm being used, if it's, whatever. So, and a lot of that just stems from abandonment issues when I was a kid and whatever else, right? And insecurities and all that shit. So it was nice to see. So we decide on Paraguay and then we start putting it into play. What ends up happening though is over the next few months, we get into little tiffs, little fights. Usually when she's back in Venezuela and I'm in Canada, I'm going out too much or, you know, I'm not responding as quickly as I should, like stupid shit, jealous, whatever stuff. Now, we end up getting into a huge fight towards the end of the year because I find out that my ex-girlfriend from Nicaragua had messaged her and started just harassing her, and telling her terrible things about me, including some of the businesses that I had not quite yet opened up to about with my wife at the time. So, like she comes from that world, so it wasn't very shocking, but to find it out from an ex-girlfriend, it
Right.
caused a lot of problems for us. So going into 2022, we're broken up. I'm still moving to Paraguay regardless, and I have faith in the relationship working itself out. So I'm still focused on that, but I just kind of go off because we're not talking anymore. Months had passed actually, where maybe one day I'd message her or she'd message me and we'd ignore each other, whatever. So I just go on a rant. I go back to Europe, which I hadn't been for a couple of years because I was spending all my time in Latin America. And oddly enough, I'd always had intuition throughout my whole life. That whole law of attraction, believing thing, like it's not for everybody, but for me, it was very real. I envisioned everything that happened in my life, including getting married to a foreigner, being in Italy 4 times a year, all this stuff I imagined when I was like a teenager. And I guess I projected it so much that a lot of it happened. Something told me that year that I need to go to the rest of the Central American countries that I had yet to visit because this was going to be my last year of traveling. Nothing happened other than the breakup, business wise, money wise. Not a single thing happened in like 6 years. Like, I never had a real problem, never really lost money, but something told me this is it for you. This is your last year, so enjoy it. Maybe subconsciously I was thinking, okay, because I'm moving to Paraguay, I'm going to stop, but something told me something's going to happen. Sure enough, it does. So that year, I like I said, I go off. I start traveling in Central America, El Salvador, Honduras, a couple other places. I'm going to Europe. Everything's still on autopilot. Still not talking with my wife. Eventually, halfway into the year, we reconnect and we realize we've been stupid about this. Like we've wasted so much time. We still love each other. We want to be together. We want to go to Paraguay. So let's just stop this shit and get back together. So months after breaking up, we get back together. I meet her in Colombia. I decide to take her to Cartagena to give her new experiences. Basically, we met in this shitty place in a shitty way, but I'm going to give you some new memories so that you can remember it in a better light. Spend some time in Colombia. We start working on it. She goes back to Venezuela. I go back to Canada just to collect the last of our documents. So, for instance, like for her girls, she needed permission from the father to take them out the country, birth certificate, little shit for the permanent residence application. Something else happens. Again, we get into a little fight. Don't talk for a month. This is again about stuff that we were just not communicating about. It was egos at the end of the day. You know what I mean? She had a very traumatic life, and in many ways, so did I. And we had our issues, and I think we took it out on each other, which really sucks because we were the people that
Oh,
were supposed to save each other, you know?
you never had to work at a brothel.
Yeah, I know I didn't. So
I mean,
I couldn't
you may
resonate
have
with
had a
that,
bad
you know?
life, but
No, I did not
it
have to
was
do
pretty
that.
bad.
That's right. Yeah. No, I think it was just, like, more of not having family around and stuff like that,
Right.
you know what I mean? I didn't know how to be responsible. Like, I was in little ways for friends and stuff, like I had told you, in the bullying earlier on, but, like, I never had a real family structure,
Right.
right? And I didn't know how to deal with it. And I'm a
Right.
criminal at the time too, so
Yeah.
that's complicates it even more. But, yeah, never had to work at a brothel, thank God. Hopefully, I don't have to. We'll see
Yeah.
what happens, though. Still young. But okay, so yeah, another little tiff, and then we get over it, and we make what is our last trip to go to Paraguay. So this shit is like a movie. Um, I'm on my way out. I'm a couple of months away from being completely clean. I'm about to go into this business that I told you about with AT&T. I've walked away from I'm not doing identity theft anymore. I'm not doing any collections. I have a little bit more money coming in from the embezzlement, and I got about 100K in Panama in that safety deposit box. So in my mind, I got $250,000, a little bit more than that, coming to me over the next 3 to 5 months, and that money's getting pumped into Paraguay. And $250,000 is not shit in the US and Canada these days, but in Paraguay, I mean, a condo costs $40,000. The business is costing me $50,000 to set up.
Right.
So, you know what I mean? It's not like I'll have an okay life. I'll have it set up for myself. And this is where it all goes bad. So, we get to she gets to Colombia first. She's in Cucuta, which is the city at the Venezuelan border. And I get to Bogota first. So I go from Winnipeg to Toronto, Toronto to Bogota. When I get to Bogota, my guy in Panama calls me. This is the guy that takes care of things for me when I'm not there. And he lets me know, he basically says, "Your money's fucked." And I said, "What do you mean my money's fucked?" And he says, "The woman that was managing the bank for the last couple of years, like, I'm not gonna say her name, but she got arrested." I was like, "What do you know about it?" And he's like, "Well, there was a whole thing."
What country is this in again?
This is Panama, where I had the safety deposit box. And that's where a lot of the money laundering was going through Panama as well. Now, this woman gets arrested, and she basically, to buy herself out of the situation, points at all the safety deposit boxes that she's been keeping for these guys for several years, including myself. Now, other people had other things in those safety deposit boxes: diamonds, fake passports, whatever. I can only imagine. A lot of them were like cartel guys from Colombia that just wanted to stash some stuff in Panama City because a lot of the Colombians would come down to Panama City and set up shop because it's very profitable city, to have a stronghold. So these guys were selling women down there. They were selling, drugs. They were doing money laundering, whatever else. So I asked him, I was like, do you think that I got anything to worry about? You know? And he's like, no, because she doesn't know my real name. I had a fake residency card made for me out there. So I went by a different alias out there. I had a completely different name and everything. So
But
she knew me by that. Go
how
ahead.
much was in the how much was in the box?
100,000. Yeah.
Okay. Is
About
that
like
all the money you got?
80,000 USD. Sorry?
Is that all the money you got?
Cash savings, yeah. Yeah, I
Okay.
wasn't that smart, like, I was and my lifestyle, if I'm making, like, 300, 400 grand a year, my life was costing me $250,000 a year.
Right.
I'm living in hotels, I'm traveling constantly, I'm spending money on my friends, family, everything else. It was a lot. So, I was lucky that I saved anything, to be honest. But, yeah, so I asked him, like, "Do I have anything to worry about?" And he's like, "No, she probably just bailed herself out. She just, they probably said, 'You're gonna go to jail, or you can point at all these deposit boxes.'" Now I found out the reason why she even got caught was because she was doing something that none of us knew about. At least the guys that I was around didn't know about this. So what she was doing was originally she was setting up safety deposit boxes for people where you could just meet up with her, give her whatever you wanted to put in the box. She would put a fake name down and use a fake ID or whatever, and you'd have that there, and only she could access it, and one other person that was in the bank, and you have your own key as well. If you wanted, you didn't even have to go into the bank ever. I never went into the bank one time, but I always had my money stashed there. Now, what she was doing, unbeknownst to us, was she was setting up actual bank accounts for some of these cartel guys, and they were using fake passports. So this stuff all goes through the global bank, and it goes through, whatever other avenues of, to check for money laundering and whatever else. And obviously she got flagged. So a few times, and that ended up it up for all of us. She never got caught for the safety deposit boxes. She got a tap on her phone because of the I guess they sent someone in to set up a bank account with a fake passport saying that they're friends with this guy and da da da. She does it. They tap her phone and then they hear about the deposit boxes. So I don't even know if they knew about the deposit boxes after and if they thought it was just bank accounts that she was setting up. But anyways, it went to shit. That day I lost 100 grand. So I get this phone call while I'm in Bogota at an airport at a hotel right by the airport, and I get this bad news. So the next day I'm going to Cucuta to meet my wife. It was literally just a layover for a night. So I lose 100 grand and I'm like, shit, man, like it's not that it's that much money. It's not nothing though either, especially with what I've had saved, right? Or what I have coming to me. If I've got $250,000, you just took away 100,000, has a huge impact on me. So I get there and I get to Cucuta the next day, and I spend the next couple of weeks. I don't tell my wife. Spend the next couple of weeks just chilling. My birthday's coming up again, and we spend my birthday together. We just kind of chill out. The plan is still there. We're still going. Unfortunately, a day before my birthday, I got I had a I told you this already. I had a couple burner phones. I get a text message from someone in Canada with the company CFO tells me, "I'm sorry, I can't do anything." That's all I get. "I'm sorry, I can't do anything."
What
And
does that
for
mean?
the exactly. The most cryptic text ever. And by the way, I hear nothing else for a month after that. But what had happened is those 2 previous weeks that I was in Cucuta with my wife, those deposits that come into that account that I told you about when we were embezzling and I was doing 5 to 13 grand every week through this insurance account, all of a sudden there's no deposits coming through. Okay. And I'm thinking to myself nothing of it because I'm like, okay, you know what? Maybe payroll's late or whatever. It's just a week or two, whatever. But then after like 2 weeks, I sent a message out and I'm like, hey, what the fuck's going on? Where's my money? Because now we're talking about like 20 grand, 15 grand, and I need this money right now because I'm in Cucuta over here panicking about the 100 grand that I just lost. So I get this message and I panic because that's like another 150 to 180K that I have coming from this account. I've got maybe 20 grand on me. I've got some cash. I've got legitimate money in my Canadian bank account and some pesos and shit, maybe 20 grand worth. So I got enough to survive, but I'm like, then what? So another beautiful thing happens though during this time, another confirmation of how much my wife actually loved me and really wanted this to work no matter what. A day before my birthday, I find this out. I get the message, and she knew that something was wrong with me. I was quiet all day, and she's like, "What's going on? It's your birthday tomorrow. Why are you so depressed? Like you're not talking, you're not smiling. Like what's wrong? I know something's wrong." And finally I gave in, and I'm like, "We need to go talk," because her daughter was with us. I'm like, "We need to go talk alone." So we went down to the lobby, and probably one of the only times in my adult life I started to cry. And I wasn't like pouring, but I was, I was letting it out. And she's like, "What the happened?" And I was like, "Listen, like, I failed." That's all I could muster to say, you know? I was like, "I failed." She's like, "What do you mean you failed?" I'm like, "I don't think I can do this. I don't know if I can give you what I promised you anymore, you know?" That's the only thing I was thinking about this whole time. I was like, I'm gonna up her life and her daughter's life that I promised to change a year and a half ago or whatever it was.
Okay.
So the beautiful thing that happens is I think she's gonna respond with like, okay, well, I'm going home or whatever, like, or
Right.
this is over or whatever. Because I'm stupid like that. I'm thinking that. And she tells me like, I don't care if we go to Paraguay and I have to work 3 jobs while you're at home. Like, we're going and we're gonna make this work. I was never with you for money and I never asked you for a thing. So you should know that whether you're poor or whether you're rich, I'm gonna stay with you regardless. And the truth is, bro, in that year and a half, she never asked me for a penny. Like, obviously, I was taking care of her well, and she didn't really have to. But like, she never asked me to buy her anything. She never in a year and a half, bro. So
Right.
I should have known, but still, my stupid head. So yeah, she hugs me and she tells me we're gonna get through this. I'm so sorry that this happened, but like, just be smart with what we have left. Let's take that money to Paraguay. Let's get set up. We start planning. And the next day, it's my birthday. We have a nice dinner on top of the hotel. We have this little rooftop. She sets up another surprise thing for me, which was really great at that time. And yeah, we decide to play it out, see what happens. So over the next week or two, I get no contact from Canada. Panama's fucked. Everything is just falling apart, and we get into another stupid fight. Now, what this was about, it was just me being oversensitive at the wrong time. Basically, I told her I thought it was better for her to go back to Venezuela. I was gonna give her half the money that I had, which was about 10 grand or a little bit less by then, and I was gonna go back to Winnipeg and set something up so that I could start making money again. Because I started thinking like, strategically, this is stupid. Like, I'm gonna go over there with 10 grand, it's gonna be gone in like a month or two after I buy, after I pay for the immigration process, after I buy a bed and couch and groceries and whatever else, I'm gonna be broke right away. So this is not smart to do. But she took it the wrong way. So I think that she thought that I was gonna go to Canada and leave the relationship and leave the marriage, and because she thought like that too sometimes. And she was always worried about me going back to my ex or whatever else, another woman in Canada. So we get in another stupid fight, but because of the timing of it, I was probably more upset than I should have been. I should have just brushed it off and said whatever. But I'm like, how the could you do this when I just lost everything? I don't know what we're gonna do with our lives, and I don't know if we're gonna end up doing what we're supposed to do with in Paraguay. So I got mad at her and I went off on her and we broke up for good. She goes back to Venezuela. I give her a little bit of money, and then I go back to Bogota. I can't go back to Canada, bro. I'm like, at the time, I was like, I just lost everything. I've now left the marriage. I lost all the money. I'm not moving to Paraguay anymore, or I can't, at least not right now. So I go back to Bogota, the capital, and I spend 2 weeks there, and I start realizing we had other options that I didn't think that we had for us. So, for instance, she had family in Ecuador that was already situated out there. We could have stayed in Colombia, gotten refugee status for her, and then because I'm married to her, I'd be able to stay with her because I'm her spouse. So I started realizing we had other opportunities. And then this one thing that was a part of moving to Paraguay was you had to make a deposit for solvency. It was like roughly like $7,000, and I was worried about that because I'm like, "Hey, if I've got 15K and I gotta put $7,000 in the bank for solvency that I can't touch for 6 months or whatever, however how long."
Solvency is what? To prove you're not broke, that you're not
Fu
entering the country broke?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just like, you have a couple different options for solvency, like, you could, show, like, a bachelor's degree, or you could show, like, savings, like, a certain amount of savings, or just pay this solvency amount at the bank, which was, like I said, 7,000. But I was worried about that because I didn't have a lot of money left, and I needed that money right now. But then I found out while I was in Bogota and my mind is spinning, they recently changed the law. So it used to be you just get your PR right away. Now they're doing temporary residence for 2 years, and then you can either do another 2 years of temporary residence or do the PR, right? And with the temporary residency, you don't need solvency. You don't need proof of funds with the temporary residency.
Okay.
So I find this out. So I'm like, "Oh shit, this is good news." I go back to Canada 2 weeks later, and I do something very stupid. In So, no, listen, I know I
No,
did a lot of
go
stupid
out of
things in the
character.
relationship, but when it comes to the crime stuff, I didn't make too many big mistakes, right?
Okay.
This is the time I did, and it was because I was desperate. And you know when you're desperate and you know what I mean? Like you're holding on to whatever you can, that's when you make the most foolish decisions. So, I go back to Canada, I go to Vancouver because that's where I have one of the companies set up that we were embezzling. This is where I got about 150, 180K, somewhere in between there, locked in one of these accounts. And this CFO is not getting back to me, remember? So I say, "F this, I'm gonna go see what's happening." So I go over here to Vancouver, which is where I am now, and I send a biker to the office and basically say that I'm in the city, that I want my money, and that they have like, a certain amount of time to get it to me, right? CFO has a mental breakdown, lawyers up, gets one of like Canada's top criminal lawyers or whatever, and starts looking at options for themselves, I guess. And then I get this email that basically tells me from the lawyer, it's like a cease and desist, basically, right? And it's telling me, I know what you've been up to. I know you've been taking money out of this account for years. If you don't stop, we're gonna charge you with extortion, gangsterism, money laundering, blah 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 blah. I knew what it was though. I knew that the CFO is at the most of the guilt here from the beginning. Because keep in mind, this stuff existed before we came into the company. They were already doing corrupt stuff with it. So I knew that the CFO didn't want this to come to light, right? But I also knew that in that moment they were terrified. So they were willing to go all the way, lawyer, police, whatever. So there, while I was in Vancouver, this is like December 2022, just like a year and a half ago, I decide I'm completely out, you know? I decide that is your last straw, that is your last chance. You've just look at everything that's happened in the last 3 weeks. You lose the marriage is gone, the money is gone, you lose the savings. That's a sign, right? The fact that the police didn't show up to where I was staying, that I'm lucky for that. So, I had a choice, either pursue this money and see where it goes, or take a loss and move on with my life. And that's what I decided to do. So December 2022, I'm in Vancouver. I stay here 2 weeks, then I go back to Winnipeg, and I'm completely out of everything that I've done. Like that. I don't do a single thing. Between then and now, I've done nothing illegitimate. Like I've done I did my taxes properly. I did, like I've done everything to a T because in my mind I was given a second chance that a lot of people don't get. I recently found, I had my come to Jesus moment recently, and I feel lucky that I had it not being in jail because there's a lot of guys that find religion or faith in jail. I didn't have to go through that. I also feel lucky that I got out the game without being caught because most people need to get caught to get out. So
Right.
in my mind I've won. You know what I mean? I've taken losses, but I've won for
W
now.
Where's the wife?
Today the wife is in Ecuador. So she did end up going to Ecuador. I told you she had some family out there, some options. We've reconnected over the last 2 months. We're talking now, and we're like just on a completely platonic and friendly level, but it feels good that like we had a lot of hate and hurt towards each other, especially those first couple of months, obviously.
Right.
But yeah, she's in Ecuador. She's working full time. She's trying to get her life situated there. Unfortunately, though, when she moved there, which is about a year ago now, that's when all that shit started going off in Ecuador, right? With the gangs and the stuff in the street and the cartels and everything.
I would think
Yeah.
that'd be a good thing. Didn't they lock them all up?
Well, yes and no. Yes and no. So it's still Ecuador has now turned into the new transportation hub, right? For a lot of the drugs that are going into Spain and Europe and like this is a completely different podcast, a different interview,
Well, I
but
was gonna say, isn't Ecuador where they made that massive prison and just went and swooped up everybody?
that's El Salvador.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's
It's
what I
okay.
was thinking.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But because of what happened in El Salvador, the
It pushed
president Yeah,
It
the
push all
president.
the activity into Ecuador?
Well, yeah, it's a political thing. Look, there's two big cartels running things in Mexico right now. You know of them. I'm not gonna say them, but the younger one
Yeah.
will say they have concentrated all of their efforts into Ecuador because the older one was already in Colombia and kind of had that whole route locked down into Central America and into the States.
But
So
they've had problems now.
group this new group realizes that they've got some really great ports in Ecuador and that Spain is there for the taking because nowadays cocaine, which is the most profitable of all the drugs and it always will be, the new markets are Brazil and England, London specifically. Those are the two major hubs right now, bigger than the US. It used to be the US 10, 20 years ago, but now the biggest chokehold is with England and Brazil. So those guys are also making relationships with people from Paraguay, Brazil, Argentina, that younger group, and they're also moving to Spain. So a lot of the older generation are still worried about the States, still worried about Canada, still worried about Central America, the Caribbean, but this new group, they're focusing on Europe and they're focusing on further down south in South America. So they decided Ecuador is the spot we're going to do this. And in Ecuador at the time, there was no cartels. There was gangs, really big street gangs that ran a lot of the streets and prison, but they did not have the funding, resources, nothing like that in Ecuador. So this new group went in there, decided to help them out. And unfortunately, at the peak of it, my wife, ex-wife, decides to move there because she has family there. So it's gotten a little bit better recently over the last couple months, but when she first moved there, like the city was locked down, you couldn't leave your house because they were trying to round up all these guys and send them to jail, right?
Right. So I have a question. So what do you think about Zambada getting grabbed?
Okay. Okay.
Just
Okay,
curious.
so it's really funny that you ask because 2 days ago in my mind, this is what I think's happening. The new group that we're talking about right now,
Right.
I think that they're completely behind that being politically backed. So a guest that you've had recently was kind of going into this, and there's the old group and the new group, and the new group has a better relationship, what I'm told, with the new president. Okay. Now the old generation, which is who? Who just got arrested?
Who just got arrested? You mean
What name did you just say?
oh, Zambada. What's his name is anyway, with Sinaloa cartel, it's the
And his son.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's Chapo's son, but it's
Yeah.
Mayo Zambada.
Yeah, who was the leader, right?
Yeah.
Alleged a leader. So it's very interesting that, there's this new president in town, super conservative and really Chinese friendly and not a fan of the old guard. And then all of a sudden, these guys get locked up right away. Like this could have happened for several years. Why did this just happen now? To me, in my mind, this is the winds of change. This is the new group showing their power, and both groups politically and in the cartel world showing their power, and everything is about to change. I believe that the landscape is changing. Now keep in mind that old group, the Sinaloans, they're still going to control everything that they have, right? They're out here in Canada, they're in the US, obviously in Mexico, Central America, down to South America, and they even have people in other parts of the world as well. But their focus is more in the Western Hemisphere. Now, these guys, this new group, they're really focused on Europe, man. They're really focused on getting into Asia. This is all, hearsay, stuff that I hear from friends that are involved in certain things, but it really sounds like it's the new wave. It's the new cartel world. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, so what else is going on right now? What's happening?
Okay. So I'll just tell you about last year because and bring you up to where I am today. So January, I'm in Winnipeg. Last year, I work a job for the first time in 9 years. I went and worked at a club. I was doing okay with money, but nothing like what I had before. I get completely out of everything, not talking to the ex or anything. I'm staying with a friend when I first get back to the city. I was gonna stay in a hotel, and he's like, "Don't waste your money. Come stay with me. I got a free place to stay. Why not?" So while I'm getting on my feet, this idea comes to mind of writing a book because there's a ton of other stuff that's happened, throughout my life that we obviously didn't have time to get into, and I just felt like I had an interesting story. You know what I mean? And I always wanted to tell my story because sometimes you don't get the chance to. Sometimes you just get locked up and people forget about you, you know? So I wanted to write a story. So July of last year, I started writing my book. It took a couple months to write it. I decided independently just to sell copies within my city and to friends abroad first. So I printed and sold about 600 copies of my book, just word of mouth. I'd even go stand on a street corner with a little ghetto sign and sell the book like that. You know what I mean? Like the way
Right.
they used to sell tapes and CDs out the trunk of a car. So I did it like that, which I love that I got to do. That experience was cool. Unfortunately, it was November and it's freezing in Winnipeg in November. Um, Shortly after I went to New York, I had it advertised in Times Square on a couple of different of the screens. And then Johnny reached out to me and I went to do my first podcast, which was again the first time I publicly spoke about anything. People in my city knew because I'm advertising and I got a billboard in my city and I'm selling the book. But like the rest of the world had no idea who I was. They don't know my story. I'm not in the news, nothing like that. So that was the first time I really got exposure was going on that platform and speaking about my story. From there, just by luck, a director from Spain, from Barcelona, saw me and basically liked my story. He's like, "Listen, man, I think that what yours is it's a life story. It's a human story, and it has criminal elements, and there's a love story in there, and I like it. So we should do something together. I can't promise you any money or anything like that. We're gonna do this thing from the ground up. But here, look at my resume. This guy had worked with Shakira. He's done music videos for Shakira. He's produced or co-produced like 20, 30 different movies, including stuff that's been on Amazon Prime, Apple TV, all kinds of stuff. And yeah, he basically lets me know, like, come down here, man. Like, we'll make it happen, a dollar and a dream type shit. So going into the new year, which is this year, I'm just focusing on promoting my book, the Instagram, because last year in July when I started writing the book, I got Instagram for the first time in my life. I wasn't on social media at all for obvious reasons. And so I'm just promoting the book and I'm getting ready to go to Spain. And then in March of this year, so a couple months ago, I go down there. I meet with the director. I spend some time out there. I meet some interesting folks, some bikers outside outside of there. He used to be a part of an organization out there long ago when he was like in his 20s. Now he's just a director and a legitimate guy, but he has a checkered history as well, which I liked about him. You know what I mean? It makes you more comfortable talking with people that have been through that kind of life, right? So he took really good care of me, put me up in a spot in this place called Sant Pol de Mar. You can Google it after we get off here. Beautiful place, little town on the coast of Barcelona. I stay there for about a month. We film some interview segments in some beautiful locations, and we start to structure the documentary. So as of right now, the documentary is being worked on. There's other pieces that need to be done. So I have my ex-wife is going to be a part of it. There'll be a phone call with her where she talks about our meeting and stuff like that. One of my best friends that was with me through a lot of the stuff that I did and on these travels with me, he's going to speak on there. My older sister for that family character profile. And then we also got a guy coming in from Interpol that was a psychological and criminal profiler that's basically going to break down the whole story and basically say whether I'm full of shit or whether it's real. And based on his experiences with some of the people that I've worked with that he actually knows, yeah, just what's what. That's not gonna be out for like a year. I was hoping to get it done in like 5, 6 months. This guy's like, "You're crazy." Like, that's not the way it works, man.
No.
Like, you'll see this maybe next year. So for now, just working on all that. A month and a half ago, after I came back from Spain, I went to Winnipeg, my home city, Stayed there about a month and a half, reconnected with my sister who I hadn't seen in years, and then came out here to Vancouver. This year going forward, my plan is a year from now, next summer, to move to Paraguay, which has always been the plan. Between now and then, I'm working on a new book. So my first book is called A Winnipeg Story. You can look that up on Amazon. Just type it into Google, A Winnipeg Story. You'll see it come up. The other book that I'm working on is called Year of the Dragon. If you know anything about the Chinese zodiac, this year is the Year of the Dragon. I was born in the Year of the Dragon. And this is basically a year where I set up the next 5 to 10 years of my life. So I came to Vancouver because the money's better out here. I have no distractions. I don't really know anybody out here. I don't have family or friends or anything. So I completely honed down. I'm focused on my book, writing the new one, promoting the older one that dropped earlier this year in January, working on the Instagram, the documentary, and then just saving up some money, getting some I'm doing some other little things, like I'm getting a TESOL certificate, which is like teaching English as a second language, just like some minor little things on the side. But the end goal a year from now is to move to South America and set up shop there.
Hey, I appreciate you guys watching. Do me a favor, if you like the video, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so you get notified of videos like this. Also, we're going to leave Germano's links for his book in the description box, and we'll leave a link to his Instagram and any other social medias that he wants. So please click on those and follow and join and buy the book and do all the stuff you're supposed to do. And leave me a comment, share the video. Please consider joining my Patreon. It really does help Colby and I make videos like this. Also, we have Patreon exclusive content, $10 a month, and I do appreciate it. Thank you. See ya.